Secretary General, this is Andrea Palesciano from Bloomberg. President Trump has said that negotiations are effectively starting. Europeans are not in the conversation right now. They're not at the table. What can European allies, European NATO allies do to get back in the conversation? And what exactly can they offer? What can they put on the table to be included in these discussions?
Well, clearly we are intensely consulting amongst each other, including with the United States. I will be myself in Munich tomorrow, meeting with Vice President Vance. Kellogg, the special representative for Ukraine, special representative for President Trump, will be here at NATO on Monday. Yesterday I had dinner with Pete Hegseth, the new Secretary of Defense of the United States. So we are, as NATO, and the teams are, of course, intensely coordinating. And I know that many allies and many EU member states are doing the same with Washington. So we are really, and what we did the last 24 hours was also very much about getting to the same page. And this is a democratic alliance. You do not always start with concurring positions. But in these 24 hours, what I have seen was a tremendous sense of unity and of convergence of views, and maybe not on everything and every detail, but still an alliance moving united forward.
All right, staying in the same part of the room, woman in the white blouse and beige vest.
Good afternoon. My name is Julia Serivan. I'm from Republic of Moldova, representing here Journal TV. So, Mr. Rutte, last night the airspace of the Republic of Moldova was overflown by Russian drones. Some of them even exploded on the Moldovan territory, which is very serious and endangers the lives of our citizens. What can allies do to help Moldova to protect its airspace? Because it's really dangerous right now, and as we speak, Moldovan citizens are in danger.
Well, as you know, many allies, I hosted Maya Sandu, the president of Moldova, here myself in late 2024, I think it was in December. So we are having a lot of talks and consultations. And many allies are also bilaterally supporting Moldova. The European Union is very much involved because we all care about your beautiful country. And to make sure that you prevail in this ongoing, let's say, yeah, you would call it hybrid in the past, but this is really destabilization campaigns and sometimes even state-sponsored terrorism against your country. And this is what we are doing, working together on this, consulting, and making sure that we are on the same page. That is very important.
All right, and just behind her, Frankfurt Allgemeine Zeitung.
Thanks a lot, Thomas Kutschka with Frankfurt Allgemeine Zeitung. Secretary General, yesterday the US Secretary of Defense also said that in the future Europeans need to take ownership of their own, as he said, conventional security. How do you read this? Does it mean that we should expect the bulk of the US forces in Europe, which are about 100,000 at the moment, will be withdrawn from the continent? Did you discuss this with him? Did you get any assurances? And would it be wise for Europeans to basically foresee a situation where the US only provides a nuclear umbrella, but no longer any conventional protection? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. And you know, Pete Hegseth visited Stuttgart on Tuesday. On a question, I think, by you or one of your colleagues said that there are no plans to reduce troop levels. That's one. At the same time, the US is quite irritated, basically for a long time, and Trump made this very clear when he came on board in 2016, 2017, about the fact that the US is spending much more on defense than the average is in the rest of NATO, in Canada and in Europe. So we have to do more. Last year we spent 20% more. US NATO allies. So if you take out US from the numbers, the rest of NATO spend 20% more. So we can do this. But it is not nearly enough. When you look at the capability targeting process, and when you then from there start to see the emerging gaps, it has to be much and much more than this famous 2%. It will be more than 3% at least. So here he is right. And the good thing, of course, is when we in the rest of NATO spend more, that there will be more of a burden sharing with what the US is doing, because the US itself is now on about 3.3, 3.4, 3.5%, depending on which year and how you calculate it. So that burden shift is necessary. But to your concrete question, I think Piet Hekstedt was very clear in Stuttgart.
Let's see. Here, woman in the second row.
Yuri Bilat, Holland Media, Russian Media in Exile. I wanted to ask you about, like yesterday, NATO already did what Putin wanted, dropped off the idea of Ukraine membership in alliance in the foreseeable future. If this is how NATO will make Putin to start the talking process, but just give him what he wants?
Well, listen, in Washington again, NATO committed to future NATO membership for Ukraine. But it has never been agreed that whenever peace talks would start, that peace talks would end anyway and always and definitely with NATO membership. That has never been agreed. It could be, but it never was that clearly stated. What I consistently have said is we have to make sure that whatever the outcome is, we have to make sure that Vladimir Putin will never, ever try again to attack Ukraine. That is crucial. And then you and I, as I said yesterday, we can spend time, and not for a long time, I think in 10 minutes, we can think of 5 or 10 ways to make sure that we have those guarantees in place for Ukraine going forward. But there has never been a promise to Ukraine that as part of a peace deal, they would be in NATO.
All right, and now we'll go to the woman in the black jacket.
Lucrezio, Rai Italian Public Television. U.S. Secretary of Defense said that U.S. are interested towards Indo-Pacific and China more than Europe. So European Union states, they are a little bit concerned about this. What do you think about?
Spend more. Spend more. And those not on 2% get to the 2% by this summer. And those on 2% prepare for much, much more. And it will be north of 3%. Because what is behind this is two things. One is the genuine issue that the US has to concentrate on multiple theaters, including on the Indo-Pacific. Absolutely. China, etc. It is a great worry for them. And rightly so. But also a continuous debate they're having with European allies. Hey guys, we are spending over 3%, 3.5% on average in the US, and you are close to 2% or not even at 2% in the rest of NATO. So they are right. They have every right to be extremely irritated because we are saying, yeah, but spending more, that might mean maybe saving somewhere else or increased taxation or, yeah, hey, guess what? That's the same for the US. When you spend 3.5% on defense, then you cannot spend it on your pensions or you cannot lower your taxes by that amount. So they're absolutely clear. So I think these two things come together. US has to concentrate on Europe, yes, but also on other issues. And by the way, when it comes to the Indo-Pacific, and many allies to date made that point, these theaters get more and more interconnected with North Korea, China and Iran backing up Putin, particularly North Korea and China being over there in the Pacific region. As I said before to you, I have sometimes more phone calls coming out of Korea, Japan, Australia, New Zealand from senior politicians there than from some NATO allies. So they're really worried about what's happening there. They want us to work closer together. And I also said today, if the US, rightly so, sees China and other emerging situations in the Indo-Pacific as an emerging threat to that country, then we have to face that together. Not that NATO is now expanding to the Indo-Pacific, but then you have to work together as an alliance how to make sure that those security threats of the US are also a concern for us here in Europe.
NHK.
Satya from NHK, the public TV station in Japan. Thank you. Kind of following up on my colleague's question, do you expect the IP4 countries to be spending more on defense considering these situations?
Well, of course, what I'm really doing in NATO is to make that push for more spending. It's not up to me, of course, to advise Japan or Korea or Australia or New Zealand on their spending levels, but your country has now a prime minister and a foreign minister and a defense minister. The defense minister is defense minister, and the foreign minister and the prime minister are former defense ministers. So you have the three most involved politicians in the cabinet, really being very much, and I was on the phone with the Prime Minister recently, and we totally agreed on the importance of working together. But of course, it is not up to me to now even move outside NATO territory and start to lecture the whole world that they have to spend more on defense.
All right, we have time for just a few more. BBC Russian service.
Thank you very much. Firstly, just to follow up, you thought it was clear that this call that happened between Putin and Trump was imminent and you knew about this. Should we take it as a sign that you and other allies knew beforehand, before this call happened, that like Trump was going to talk to Putin? And do you think that the position that he shared with Mr. Putin, was it just American position, or was it, you know, like something that everybody agreed on? This is my first question.
So I first answer that question,
okay,
then
sure,
we go to your second question.
Sure.
Now, what I said is we always knew that this week that call was imminent, not exactly at that particular time slot. It's not that detailed that we consult with each other, but we knew a call would happen soon. It was imminent, and teams are consulting each other. That doesn't mean that we always consult in detail about all the talking points in each of the phone calls each of the leaders within NATO is making. But of course, there is a large sense of sharing what each of us is doing.
Okay, and my second question is, President Zelensky said today that there's a huge risk that the negotiations and just the conversation about the future of Ukraine and Europe could turn into bilateral US-Russia conversation. And I think it's not a secret that Vladimir Putin wants to see something like the second Yalta, you know, like the situation where he sits with an American president and they decide on the fate of the whole world. And it feels that in the last 2 days, the risk that Europe will be excluded, Europe and Ukraine will be excluded from this conversation became much higher. What do you think about this?
Well, first of all, the first one President Trump called after he was on the phone with Putin was President Zelensky. They talked for an hour. Tomorrow, President Zelensky will meet with Vice President Vance. I will myself have talks tomorrow with President Zelensky in Munich. So we are closely coordinating between the US and also Ukraine and, of course, European allies.
All right, and just behind her, the blonde woman.
Tanja Komarica, Serbia. What are the key challenges in NATO's relation with the non-member countries in the Western Balkans, and how does NATO plan to strengthen cooperation with these countries?
Well, obviously, we are very much involved, as you know, in Kosovo through KFOR. We are also closely following and being helpful, trying to be helpful in Bosnia-Herzegovina. I myself have excellent relations with all the leaders in the region, thanks to my previous role, including President Vučić of Serbia. So we are in constant contact, making sure that whatever we can do to contribute to stabilizing the region, we do. We have just had the Kosovo elections. The electoral committee still has to decide, I think, on the exact outcome, but we have seen the trend. It might probably mean that you will have a coalition now in Kosovo. And that political process, of course, has to take place, as is normal in a democracy. But we are closely connecting and following everything happening there. And as you know, the Deputy Secretary General is also from the Western Balkans. She is from North Macedonia, and she is a great advisor on all these issues.
All right, Echo.
Artem Besedin, ECHO. So if, as we see, negotiation may start soon, maybe in this half year or year, does that mean that member states are effectively accepting the suspended status of the annexed territories? How does it align with statements supporting Ukraine's sovereignty? Does that mean that NATO accepts all these territories are controlled by Russia forever?
Well, again, what I said before, we want peace. We want to make sure that when the talks really get underway, that you guys are, the Ukrainians, but I know you're in exile. I'm not sure whether you live in Ukraine now, but at least that Ukrainians are in the best possible position to conduct those talks. And that whatever the outcome is, that we make sure that it is the full stop. And that Russia will never try again. And and really are consulting with our allies here in Europe, with the Canadians, and particularly, of course, with the Americans. As I said myself, I will have many meetings with senior American officials in person in Munich and here in Brussels, but of course also on the phone. And that is important, so that, because we all have that wish that we will get to a durable peace in Ukraine, but that we try to do it in a way that it is indeed enduring, lasting. And of course, President Zelensky himself is very much part of all those conversations.
All right, gentlemen in the front and center.
Raf Sanchez, NBC News. Secretary General, you said the NATO alliance is united around the goal of putting Ukraine into the strongest possible position going into these negotiations. But did Secretary Hegseth explicitly confirm to you that that is the American position? Because the way President Trump was speaking yesterday, it sounded to many people like he sees the United States as essentially a neutral mediator in these talks.
No, but you know that the US is one of the biggest suppliers of military aid into Ukraine, which is still ongoing. And what is very important, of course, here is that going forward, and I've said it before, I expect the US for the European allies to take a bigger share of the financial burden. That might be the case, and I would not be surprised, because the US has paid a lot of money. And luckily, over 2024, what we have seen is that now the European part of NATO is taking about 60% of the burden in terms of the money involved. And going forward, I expect the US to, for the Europeans to step up even further.
All right, and final question. Gentleman in the beige jacket.
Secretary, thank you for this opportunity. Secretary Hegseth said yesterday that the idea of putting boots on the ground involving the US troops in Ukraine is off the table. Do other NATO allies share the same idea? And if NATO is not involved in this type of security guarantee for Ukraine, what can we expect from NATO? Because we're fighting that war.
Yes, I understand that. But why do you guys want to discuss in a press conference the exact configuration of what a lasting peace deal would look like? Including this, and you were right on this, the security guarantees which have to be part of that. Because, as I said before, you can have many discussions on how to do that. It could be NATO, it could be not be NATO, it could be individual countries helping. There are many ways to do that. But to go into that in detail, the only thing we will be doing is informing Vladimir Putin. And he is sitting in that reclining chair listening to what I'm answering to your question if I would give you the answer in full. And I won't, because I don't want to make him any wiser.
That's exactly what the US Defense Secretary said.
What he said is he made very clear the US position on yes or not NATO as part of a peace deal. And he is totally entitled to do that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That's all we have time for.